website would get, or streamer, or anything, whether they're small or a multi-billion-dollar company. It shouldn't fucking matter.
I mean, people come on here and deny like, war crimes and stuff regularly, and they don't
Yep.
seem to get punished. And they've made millions off of it.
Mm-hmm. Look at Nick Fuentes until recently. All of those fucking people just made so much money. Even YouTube makes so much money off ads on videos that shouldn't be on the platform, but they fuck people over. Who knows? The people who made their website.
Fifth gen always glorifying RG proxies. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Always. Yeah, we have complete episodes talking about how Iran is shit and the IGC proxies are awful.
Like,
But
it just hit me with a warning, right?
I think
like,
this
if they
person's
take the
being
stream down
sarcastic,
again,
but-
they're gonna hit us with a strike.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that's awesome. Yeah, but I don't know if you know, we've been paid by the Iranian government to
and the CIA
to shit on them. So
I'm still waiting for my my paycheck.
Oh, I got mine in the
mail. Oh, they got Ace.
No, I'm here. I'm alive.
I bet it was the music video though.
Oh, gotta be.
Because we opened in with satire, with something satirical.
Okay. Yeah.
So does that mean that all those late night hosts that post shit like that and do stuff like that, which are flooded in YouTube and YouTube loves to promote, does that mean they get taken down for stuff like that? Oh no, they get special privileges. Of course they do. Why wouldn't they? Remember, everyone, it's YouTube.
Alrighty.
Anyway, so these shipping lanes, I guess this is the issue, right? Because something that's not new, they've been attacking these shipping lanes for years, but now it's escalated.
I mean, we talked to someone recently who said a lot of Somali pirates who were actually Yemeni pirates. So,
yeah,
which would make sense.
But is it really a surprise that the US is moving here? Like, no, this is literally the US Navy's job.
The big reason the US is as powerful as it is because the US Navy protects free trade. And if you fail to do that, it's kind of like, what's the point? You know what I mean? That's what I don't get when people get really mad about the US's involvement in this. It's because it's one of their primary functions as a country, right? So
yeah, it's literally the mouth of the Suez Canal. Like, of course the US is going to be there. The US is always in that area. I bet you they're probably everywhere around Panama as well.
And people have asked, like, why doesn't China get involved? Because they're very close by, which I can agree with to a degree. But at the same time, China's probably looking at the US and they're like, that's not me, dude. That's you.
Yeah, not our job.
Not me, man.
You protect our stuff. We don't protect shit.
Oh no! It's probably even better than that because their close relationship with Iran, right? Iran's the guy. The IRGC is who are the guys who are feeding the Houthis the targets on ships to hit, right? So the IRGC is not going to feed them Chinese ships. So China's like, okay, why the fuck should we care?
All right.
Well, the Houthi have been saying that they're attacking Israeli ships, but they haven't. I mean, they captured one Israeli ship. I'd show the footage, but I don't want to get a strike.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's kind of the other thing I wanted to note about the Houthi movement is out of all these kind of Iran IRGC backed like proxies, they're probably the most like competent. Besides maybe Hezbollah, who's very well armed but hasn't really done shit in a long time. I mean, they're shooting missiles at the border with Israel, but I mean, they could do more. But they don't want to involve themselves in that sort of thing.
too busy running drugs or pushing drugs to like.
Yeah, you get big money, big money. That's the thing that I remember. There was that whole story about like how they caught this in Brazil. They caught this like Hezbollah guy who was supposedly planning an attack on some Jewish center in Brazil, and they caught him at the airport. And I was like, "You sure? You sure it wasn't drugs? You know what I mean? Like, you sure he's not a financier? Like, don't get me wrong. They've done it. They've done it before. They did in Argentina back in the '90s or the '80s. But yeah, I don't think the way the whole Hezbollah circuit kind of operates today, that they've got like militants in Latin America. I think it's definitely a financing thing. I mean, the whole reason we know that Hezbollah has a whole like circuit out in Latin America was because they intercepted a phone call the DEA intercepted a phone call in Arabic back in 2004 that was discussing like a black finance thing, like drug deal type operation. And the guy who was on the phone, who was later identified as a financier for Hezbollah, was actually a Lebanese Christian. So it seems like more of a business relationship thing. James, it appears there's a question for you.
Ooh, yes. It's something about sea mines. The Iranian government, as part of its sea denial strategy, they've made a panoply of weapons designed to keep the U.S. out of the Persian Gulf. And they've transferred a bunch of these weapons to both the Houthis and to Hezbollah, right? The Israeli government actually airstruck a Syrian government storage facility just a few weeks ago, right? Because the Syrians were transferring a bunch of Iranian manufactured, technically they're Syrian manufactured, but they're Iranian designed anti-ship missiles to Hezbollah, right? So the Houthis have also been, I guess, benefited from Iran's technological prowess in the sense that they have a large monopoly of sea mines, some domestically manufactured, some given by Iran, and they have more than enough to basically strangle global trade through the Red Sea, because this is sort of a complex issue in the sense that nobody really understands how international shipping companies and insurance policies work, right? It's a very cryptic subject, but you only need to place a handful of sea mines to completely dissuade major insurers, or actually not necessarily insurers, but major shipping firms from traversing a certain body of water, right? Because their insurance premiums skyrocket to the tune of millions of dollars, and most of them simply do not want to risk sending a tanker.
Sorry to cut you off, but speaking of shipping insurance being such a cryptic thing, this reminds me of when people, like, when they take a ship and they take the crew hostage. The reason a lot of these people aren't released for years and years and years and years is because certain shipping companies, like there's a separate type of insurance you need to get for like ransom payments. Mm-hmm. And like a lot of shipping companies don't pay for those because for whatever, either they don't think it's going to happen or they don't care. But yeah, anyways, back to what you were saying.
So that's a very good question in the sense that the U.S. isn't actually like sitting at the Bab al-Mandab. Bab al-Mandab?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
The choke.
The choke point, yeah.
The choke point. Right now, the U.S.'s plan is to escort ships through the Bab al-Mandab. And as it stands, there's just naturally there's commercial maritime activity everywhere, right? Or everywhere next to land. So you can't really discriminate between fishing boats and fishing boats that are placing sea mines without searching all of them, right? So we don't really have the assets on hand for that. I don't think anybody does. actually, this is even relevant for the case of a China.
Also, like you start, searching every fishing boat off that coast. Some of the locals are going to start resenting your presence. You know what I mean? It's a
Yes.
very double-edged sword. But the other, dang, what was I going to say? Dude, I had something and I completely blanked. Someone say something.
Okay,
I
so
completely
I wanted
blanked
to
on what I was
ask
gonna say.
specifically about how Egypt is going to get fucked from the trade, and they're going to be, I heard, numbers of millions of dollars that they're missing out on because of the Suez Canal and like the rerouting through there. Sounds like Egypt is going to be hurt more than anyone else.
Yeah, that seems very plausible. Yeah, that's the thing is it's like obviously this hurts international trade in general, but Egypt does make a lot of money off of the Suez Canal, and this hurts them more than anything because if this drags on, right, people are just going to find other ways to ship shit. They're not just going to do it through that particular area. They're just going to do it through other means. The thing that I actually wanted to talk about earlier is we've been talking about how piracy in this area is very common. And John, you actually talked about in one of our intros for this show a couple months ago or something. But the IRGC attacks a lot of oil tankers in the what is it? Is it the Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah.
That's a different area geographically for sure. But these incidents happen a lot in the Strait of Hormuz, and for a while there was the whole thing is like, are we going to put, like John was talking about a few months ago, are we going to put U.S. Marines on ships and oil tankers going through the Strait of Hormuz because the IRGC Navy keeps attacking them? And it's kind of, I don't know, just felt like pointing that out because it's interesting how it just comes full circle, right? You're sitting around, you're debating this thing. It's like, do we put Marines on these tankers? Do we not? And now it's like this thing where
Yeah, they just sent troops there in October or November. Sent like how many? Do you remember?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest.
I know Hezbollah TV has a thing on it.
Ooh,
How come Hezbollah TV's shit never gets banned? They literally have videos apologizing for the IRGC and why they're great. Fuck them.
Yeah, their whole thing is apologizing for terrorists. They never get banned.
Anyway, so what's going to change in this area is we going to talk about U.S. hitting Yemen targets. I know they have a list of targets that they're going to hit if it comes to it, and the Houthi have said bring them on. We have plane.
We have plane. I think it's definitely a possibility. I don't think it'll really escalate anything. I mean, at the end of the day, the whole reason that Iran has proxies is so that Iran doesn't have to deal with the blowback it gets from the US itself. That's kind of the whole point. So no, like if the Houthis get blown up at the port of Hodeida by the US, it sucks for them, but as we've seen with other Iran-backed militant groups, and even Qasem Soleimani himself, Iran isn't going to come to their aid. No one's coming to help them. Like, this isn't a red line for anybody. These guys are kind of like expendable in a way.
And actually, to tack onto that, I'm not even sure the U.S. Navy can actually do all that much against the Houthis in the zone of control, right? Well, actually, from the I was gonna say from the video, but then remembered that we got.
Yeah. I have a lot of reference material. I'm just not going to pull up now.
Thanks, YouTube. You can't really hit all their transport vehicles for their launchers, right? For launchers and transport vehicles. For their larger missiles, sure, you can see them from space. Those are pretty easy to hit. But for their smaller drones and for their mines, maybe even their cruise missiles, they sort of just look like they ride on small pickup trucks, right? You can't really hit every single vehicle in Yemen. We don't even have enough bombs for that.
Don't go doubt the U.S. military.
The other thing too that I seem to get from this is the way the missiles that Iran gives these proxy groups work, right? These missiles and these suicide drones and things of that nature. It's not so much that they're like these great big like technological feats of mastery or whatever. It's that they're cheap, you can produce a lot of them, and the idea is if you shoot enough of them, you could eventually overwhelm, a US military base or a target or whatever it is you're trying to hit. I'm not one who understands a lot about weaponry, so James, if that's if am I like getting the
Yeah,
right
that
idea
is
here? Is that
exactly
kind of the
on
whole
point.
thing? Like it's not so much that they're trying to like, okay, we're gonna beat them through technological superiority. It's like human wave tactics, but for projectiles.
Exactly. It's a you can. I'm going to pick on the U.S. again and the West in general. We tend to operate under the illusion that only Westerners are capable of doing math, right? But that's clearly incorrect, right? Because there's these things, or fancy things called salvo models, right? It's a very nerdy concept that they teach you at the war colleges and shit, where you really have to be at the correct side of a cost exchange curve. If the Houthis have 500 missiles or 500 loitering munitions, and the U.S. carrier group that they're shooting at only has 400, well, then that carrier group is fucked.
I mean, and speaking of this, and I've actually had a little bit of a personal run-in with this. Not that personal, but personal enough. The Houthi missiles have hit some important targets in the past. I remember I was on a flight out of Saudi Arabia. I was going to Qatar. I was exhausted. I'd been up for like 2 days straight, and I'm getting on the plane. I'm like, damn, this plane isn't getting off. This plane isn't taking off. It was like, we boarded like 30 minutes late. The plane hadn't taken off for an hour after we'd gotten in. I'm like, what's going on? Eventually, I just doze off and I wake up in Qatar and we get off the flight to Qatar and they tell everyone on the plane, they're like, you've missed your flight. You're like, all of you have missed your flight. We're like, what? And so everybody's just, everybody who just got off my plane is pissed. They're all panicking, like trying to get their flights rescheduled. Anyhow, everything works out. You get your flight rescheduled. They pay for us to stay in this hotel. They drive us down to the hotel. And I go upstairs, turn on the hotel TV. What do you know? The Houthis had hit an oil rig in Jeddah where I'd been taking off. So they like hit it and blew it up. So it was like a thing where I'm assuming that's why my flight got canceled, is because they weren't sure if the airspace was clear, right? So that was just yeah. They've hit a lot of important targets in Saudi Arabia in the past. They've literally just go online and Google, you know, um, Houthis hit Saudi oil facility or whatever, and you will find dozens of articles going back to maybe 2017. And someone's got a question here. What infrastructure does the coalition have in the area? I know everyone and their mom has a base in Djibouti, but what does that mean for this conflict? I'm not sure 100%. I think maybe someone else can chime in on this, but I think the base in Djibouti is going to be pretty important for this, because if I'm not mistaken, when there was the whole Somali pirate
I know
crisis,
that the one reason why they're pulling in the UAE is because they are also going to do the staging area there. They have like a port that they need to use or something.
The whole reason, and back when the whole Somali pirate crisis was going on, like 2008, 2009, I'm pretty sure that was a pretty major staging area as well. So, I mean, Djibouti, it's your time to shine. Anyone else have anything to add about that? I've heard that country is literally just like 7 military bases on an island. Not an island, but you know what I mean.
Are you talking about Djibouti? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about 5, I think, it now.
Like people have always talked about, like, you just go there and there's nothing. It's just military.
I think they're
bases.
just Navy bases, right? Navy and air bases.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of air bases, and then there's a bunch of other. I guess the U.S. has permissions from Saudi Arabia to use a bunch of their southern bases. A handful of their southern airports, but we'll probably ask Egypt for permission if we can use.
Which I would imagine Egypt will give, because the way I see it, Egypt and Saudi don't want to be seen as being in the coalition on paper, but they also don't want to seem like they're not pulling weight, if you know what I mean. Also, because like this type of thing, it affects them quite a bit. But yeah.
I was gonna ask about like this somehow connected to Israel and Palestine, because why would Egypt join the anti-Palestine coalition? It's very easy to be seen like that.
I mean, that's the other thing too, is it's like that's a good thing that you brought up, because we talked about how in a sense Egypt on one hand wants nothing to do with Yemen, and then you've got Saudi on the other hand, who is in this kind of thing where they don't want to further piss off the Houthis in the midst of what has been appeared to be like a pretty decent ceasefire. Although I think 4 Saudi soldiers were killed 2 months ago, but that's a whole other thing. That's how ceasefires are. People, they get broken. But yeah, that's the other thing too, is it's like on paper, right? The Saudis don't have any relations with Israel, so that would be perceived as very bad if they were to join this coalition, because it makes them look like they're doing something in favor of Israel. The UAE doesn't care, because they already have, again, one, they just don't care. 2, they already have on paper, like they have official relations with Israel. As far as Israel concerning with Egypt is, on the one hand, Egypt, it's like, yes, there are official relations with Israel, very tepid relations, though. It's not nearly as warm as the UAE. And obviously wanting nothing to do with Yemen, but I don't know. This wouldn't be the worst thing I think that Egypt has done. I mean, Egypt and Israel had previously collaborated in sort of shutting down smuggling routes in the Sinai between Egypt and Israel that were being exploited by a number of groups. Obviously, you had Hamas was one of the groups that was smuggling. This was back in like 2014, 2015. Hamas was one of the groups kind of exploiting this smuggling. The Islamic State in Sinai was one of the groups that was exploiting this. And, Israeli criminal groups and Egyptian sort of Bedouin clans were also exploiting these like arms and drug trafficking routes. So that was like a big deal. I remember in Egypt in 2015, it was a pretty big deal, because people kind of saw it as like, oh, our army and their police and our police are kind of openly collaborating. But yeah, at the same time, in Egypt's case, a lot of things are going wrong right now with the currency devaluing, large amount of IMF debt. If it were to somehow, the public were to take it as a perception of, oh, they're working with Israel on top of all this bullshit, it could ignite something far worse. So again, I don't know. I could totally see them joining the coalition if the Suez starts bleeding money. But at the same time, there's also a lot of things you have to consider from them in a strategic perspective. And, a lot of people like to say that, the Arab states like to use Israel to distract from their own failures at home, which is partially true. But I also think that a lot of Arab states would also like to forget, the Palestinian issue ever existed, because it would just allow them to make more decisions on the international stage that made sense, as opposed to saving face, right? Because it makes sense for Egypt to be in this coalition, but they don't want to be perceived as being pro-Israel by the public, right? Like it makes sense for Jordan to, for example, stop certain smuggling routes and things of that nature. But again, it's a perception. It's an issue of perception within their public, right, within the public eye, that a lot of Arab states don't like, and they would rather that the world just forgot about the whole Palestinian issue, because it would mean that they could just kind of do what they wanted in some cases.
Does this blow up into anything bigger, with Israel Palestine happening just up here, Yemen going on now, Iran just over there? It's all sort of.
I don't think so.
Centralizing.
I think again, I was saying this in the earlier stream, but I think it's ultimately just a more high stakes game of what Iranian proxy groups are doing in Iraq and Syria. It is, because it involves trading routes and shipping routes and things of that nature. It's, you know, it seems like every Iran-backed group has the same playbook: launch missiles, launch drones, get hit, do it again, maybe stop for a couple months, do it again. And the reason this one is a bit more high stakes is because of the shipping aspect. So I mean, that's the thing that, you know, you see here, where it's like, okay, if this definitely has more potential to escalate than other things because people's money is at stake here, and, you know, a bit more of a security factor is at stake here, but who knows? And I mean, you know,
well, this is kind of what I've heard from Hamas themselves, is that because capital is involved, these capitalists are going to put more pressure on Israel to end the war in Gaza.
well, I mean, this is the thing, right? When
this, like I said, this is coming from Houthi sources that say this.
Right? Yeah. I mean, again, and if that's their goal, then I mean, if they get that to happen, I mean, I guess, you know, mission accomplished for them. But on the other hand, you bring this up, and there's also like a lot of talk about like these unnamed sources who spoke to the Wall Street Journal or whoever, who were talking about like Joe Biden has been telling Netanyahu, he's like, you need to wrap this up before the year ends. You know what I mean? So,
I mean, apparently that's been happening. Did you hear what Netanyahu said to him?
what did Netanyahu say to him?
Oh, but you dropped the atom bombs on Japan.
I mean, oh yeah. Not him specifically.
Of course, he said that.
I mean, at least the atom bomb ended it. You know what I mean? I mean, to put into perspective, the kind of guy Netanyahu is, Nicolas Sarkozy. I don't know if you guys remember who that is, but Nicolas Sarkozy, the former prime minister of France, or I'm sorry, president of France, found him insufferable. Like, you know how insufferable you got to be for Sarkozy to be like, man, this guy fucking sucks.
So bad.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody likes Netanyahu. I think Trump may have said something nice about him.
Trump doesn't like him anymore.
Mm-hmm. Who is the prime minister of France who he was like before? He was in Obama's admin, and he was a Putin simp and basically helped Putin take Georgia. And now
hold on.
Yeah, and now he's anti-Putin because that's what like the party is.
Was that Hollande or was that Chirac?
Wait, that's a good question.
We're talking about Georgia. That's one of the two. I mean, Hollande stood around and Hollande and Merkel stood around and let Russia do whatever they wanted to Ukraine back in 2014, 2015. Those two were fucking useless. Chirac was like this really like socialist guy. I remember he chose to stay out of the Iraq War, which, I mean, not a bad move.
And that's how we got Freedom Prize.
Yeah, that is how we got Freedom Prize. Yeah. This is another thing I did want to bring out. There are some parallels here because a lot of people have talked about, there's been a lot of discourse on the interwebs where people are like, how come the and called him like Newt Gingrich. That's great. Could you imagine being compared to Newt fucking Gingrich? I'd kill myself personally.
So how is capital served by ending Israel's security crackdown, if that's what we want to call it? So this is just one of many stated goals so Hamas is also claiming that they're only targeting Israel, even though that's not true, right? They've captured an Israeli ship. They're still holding hostages from this Israeli ship, but they believe that capital not being able to use these shipping lanes will damage capital, and which will then lead to more capitalist pressure on Israel. But the thing is that much like Putin, even though Netanyahu has way more fragile power than Putin, but Putin won't end Ukraine and went into Ukraine because the nationalists said that we got full punishment and sanctions for taking the Donbass. If Putin used a full measure back then and did a full-scale invasion of Ukraine back then, Ukraine probably...
Crimea?
No, the whole thing.
Are
So
you
like
talking back?
they got sanctioned. They got sanctioned in 2014. So that's why he came back around with Dugin, and Dugin was like risen up because Dugin was the one who said we paid full price for a half measure.
Right, I
Right.
gotcha.
So that's the thing with Netanyahu, is that the coalition he has is even further right than the Likud party. So if he pulls out, they'll stop supporting him and he'll instantly be fallen from power. And then he'll have to go to court, because a lot of this is Netanyahu just staying out of prison for taking bribes and shit.
Yeah,
Because Israel's
it's amazing.
constitution
Yeah, I
says that you can't be prosecuted while you're president.
Netanyahu's whole thing is amazing. It is amazing that he's still in power, and I mean, the whole thing is with Netanyahu as well. It's amazing that he even won the prime minister's seat again, because he was under investigation. He's been under investigation for bribery schemes for 5 years now. It's the most insane thing.
Israel does not have a government; it's a failed state.
But
Yet they still can do a genocide. That's what I say to people when we talk about China falling. You know, it's like Israel is a broken country. It doesn't function, and it still can do genocide.
But the thing that I wanted to bring up is because there's a lot of parallels between the war in Yemen and what's going on now. A lot of people say with Israel, they're like, why does the U.S. like support this country who is not really a super strategic ally, even compared to our other Middle Eastern allies? And you know, they're conducting this war in a super brutal manner, which is, you know, quote unquote, like antithetical. These are all hypotheticals, but it's antithetical to the U.S.'s values. Da, da, da. I mean, just look at Saudi Arabia and Yemen, right? They supported Saudi Arabia for how long? Four or 5 years.
Yeah, and the only like time anyone cared was when a guided bomb dropped on a school bus with 40 children on it in a market district, and then they got in trouble and had to scale back.
And that's the thing, is like the U.S. people underestimate, like the U.S. doesn't really, obviously there, you know, there's a strategic purpose of which they have their allies and they select their allies, but a lot of the US's support to certain countries is very much predicated on, okay, how long have we had a relationship? How much do we, like, you know, how much historical ties do we have?
Is that not how every decision is made on geopolitical scale?
I mean, not necessarily, because there are certain, I think there are certain, you know, countries that will dump an ally if they don't find them to be strategic to them. I think the reason the U.S. supported Saudi's war in Yemen so heavily and supported Israel's war now so heavily is because there are very long-standing ties between the U.S. and Saudi and the U.S. and Israel. And, you know, there are other countries where I see, like, I look at the EU, for example, and the EU is a lot more calculated in who they, and obviously because the EU countries have more to lose when someone fucks up, right? But the EU is a lot more calculated about who they let into their coalition and things of that nature, and you need to meet certain prerequisites to be a friend, you know what I mean? So, and there's a lot of debate about this within like EU. I heard the funniest thing. So someone said like Europe, instead of getting gas from tyrannical regimes like Russia and Saudi Arabia.
This is what I was going to bring up, because you brought up the EU. Like, yeah, they're a big part of this.
They were like, instead of getting oil and gas from tyrannical regimes like Russia and Saudi Arabia and, you know, Azerbaijan, they should get it from Algeria, who is famously not, you know, fucked up or tyrannical at all.
But that's a big part of it, is that the EU, because they can't touch that Russian gas, the gas prices for the EU are going to raise first. We can expect our gas prices to raise as well because of this.
They were just going down too. I'm pissed.
And this will only make more people want to vote for Trump over Biden, because somehow he'll be better at dealing with these things.
I think a lot of people talk about like, oh, the Trump presidency was so peaceful. The Trump presidency was so great. There was a lot going on during the Trump presidency, man. The war in Yemen was in full swing. The war in Libya was in full swing. Let's see. I mean, shit.
in Iraq and Syria, loose.
I mean, yeah, Iraq and Syria he was like, you know, he talked about how the war was over when it was clearly wasn't. I mean, JNIM stepped out of the shadows in Africa. What else went on during his presidency? I mean, the whole Tongo in Niger that happened under him too, right?
No, that was Obama, I think.
Oh, that was Obama.
No, it was 2017. So that was Trump.
Was Trump as well. I mean, the whole thing.
What was Obama's scandal? Benghazi, of course.
Benghazi. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing people need to realize is like when you're talking about politics on a global scale, there's never one guy you can just point to, right? There's way too many things happening at once for you to really try and blame it on one guy. I mean, what else? I mean, the M23, the problem we have with them kind of resurging, that started under Trump.
He negotiated with the Taliban.
I mean, again, you can't necessarily blame all of those on him, but it just goes to show that like,
okay, can we blame?
Shit's gonna happen regardless.
Can we blame Al Shabaab's quick swing back on him for like dipping out of Somalia?
What happened? I didn't hear that.
Oh yeah. When the Trump administration pulled U.S. strike assets out of Somalia, he moved them back to Kenya. Just as
you're talking about when he tried to like end AFRICOM, right? Yeah. I mean, I think you could. I think the way it's going right now, you have the Somali army has been in this constant state where they're like, oh, we're conducting this new offensive against Al-Shabaab. It's like, okay, you know, they announced that like a year or two ago, it was last year, in April of last year. They're like, we're going to do this offensive against Al-Shabaab. We want to clear them out before the African Union forces leave, who are on their way to leaving, by the way. I think they're starting to pull out right now. And they fail. It hasn't gone the way that they expect. We're talking like we're less than a month away of the African Union forces starting to pull out. And, you know, it seems like every time the Somali army takes over one town or one city, Al-Shabaab comes and takes it right back. So it's like this really big back and forth. And then now, just recently, like a few weeks ago, the president was like, we're going to do a new offensive. It's like, what the fuck was the last year, man? Like, what's going on? But I do think, I definitely think, to a degree, Al-Shabaab was definitely emboldened when AFRICOM came back. I'm sorry, when AFRICOM said they were pulling back, and a lot of people were very critical of Biden when he said that they were going to bring back a lot of the U.S.'s strike capabilities in Somalia. And granted, I do understand why some of that criticism came, because a lot of the worst civilian casualties and drone strikes were in Somalia. But while Biden has to some degree really ended sort of a lot of the signature strikes where, you know, a lot of the fucked up civilian casualties have happened, and drone strikes in general have gone down by more than half under his presidency, I also think that maybe bringing AFRICOM capabilities back for Somalia is a good thing, so long as they're going off of good intelligence and things like that. And obviously that's no excuse for civilian casualties, but yeah, that is one thing where I think you could definitely see like Al-Shabaab was definitely emboldened by that. I would say it was, one of those moves. I completely forgot that he did that, man. Yeah, I remember when Biden brought it back, it was very controversial.
Have you guys? So sort of a quiet fact. I might have been tweeting about it a bunch. Did you guys hear about? What do you guys think about the Taliban sending 30,000 M4s and M16s to Gaza, the West Bank, and to Palestinian militants in Israel proper?
How
careful, you're gonna get our stream taken down again.
Hold up. How do they plan on doing that without them getting intercepted?
Oh, this is a fair point.
They just use the normal drug smuggling routes because they're lazy as shit. Yeah.
All right. I mean, it's worked before. Crazier things have happened. I imagine half of them will get through. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Actually, more than half. The Israelis have only found like 20 of them. Actually, they made a big show.
Maybe
of
they
it.
only sent that many.
Oh no. Just from knowledge that I can talk about, well, from private knowledge or secret stuff, the number is like about 30,000. And from what the Taliban are publicly bragging, yeah, it's 30,000 guns that they sent. Actually, they tend to say machine guns, so that's a bit less fun.
A lot of guns.
Dude, imagine being like some like 22-year-old in the West Bank and you just got your Taliban delivered M16 and you're like, holy shit. Like, we made
This is
it.
awesome. Well, I'm so glad I joined now. I'm so glad I waited.
I was like, dude, next time the Israelis come knocking on my door, they'll have a surprise. You ain't got no warrant, bitch.
All right, what else do we want to get into in the last 15 minutes here?
Well, I want to talk about Captagon because
yes,
what
there was just like a bust
Syrians,
with Jordan that was insane, and it was like 10 times the amount we ever saw
on the border with Jordan. Is some of the most fucking redneck shit I've ever seen. like you've got these drugs. This is a 100-kilometer long border, right, with the Hodeida province, and you've got these drug smugglers. They've got the hashish, and I bet you they're taking some of their own supply too, with the way they're bum rushing the Jordanian border with fucking AKs and rocket launchers. And we're talking about they've seized almost 6 million pills in the last week. That's a fraction of what probably got through. And I think the reason people were, I remember I had a friend, he was asking me about this. He was like, so how come drug smuggling on that border is a lot less subtle than the drug smuggling on our border? Because, the drug smuggling on the U.S.-Mexico border, it all goes through legal means of transportation, right? Like, you just get a guy who's from the U.S. and you have him drive it through a legal border and you're good. The reason it is so violent is because Jordan has closed the border with, like, completely shut down the border with Syria twice, once in 2015 and again in 2021 because of drug smuggling. And yeah, man, I'm working on an article for it because it's actually it's actually insane. But Jordan has in the past they've launched airstrikes, drone strikes within Syrian territory on either drug production facilities, or one time they even just gassed the house of some some well-known drug dealer who was transporting stuff to Jordan. And that's the reason why it's so violent, is because Jordan's border with Syria has become pretty militarized in the last 10 years or whatever.
Sounds like the Jordanians would really like the Republicans.
I mean, I also don't blame them. It's not so much an issue of where they're like, we don't want Syrian migrants, right? Syrian migrants have been in Jordan for a while now. I think it's more so an issue of, the amount of Captagon that's coming through the borders, like causing it. Like we're talking, like I was talking to someone and she works at a rehab hospital in Ahmed, and she's saying within the last year or so, they've gotten twice as many people as they've ever had. They're at like capacity for people who are in drug rehab, mostly for amphetamine abuse. And yeah, it's a pretty different situation from our border, I'd say. I think if the country to the back of you is at war, I think you have some just cause to close the border. I mean, unless you're closing it to refugees, that's a little fucked up. But yeah, I don't know. It is yeah, it's an interesting situation. It's definitely something that, if it persists at this scale, your boy Ace might have to go do some investigating.
No. See if they have any free samples from it.
Nothing like that, but it's something I'm trying to look into. I haven't been to Jordan. I've heard it's nice. So
yeah, they got that. What is it, Petra?
They got Petra. They do have Petra.
They got parties.
They got like what? They got like raves next to
it said the king hosts them himself. Dude
That's
is a party
nuts.
monster.
Shout out the king.
Shout out
the
to
king of Jordan.
Yeah, Abdullah's so chill, it's ridiculous.
You know, I almost forget he's a dictator sometimes.
Yeah, right?
Like, he's so
He's a
fucking
dictator who did
cool.
some stunts.
And that's the thing too, is like I think he's like the one like world leader who doesn't look completely awkward firing a gun.
Exactly.
Well, wasn't he in like he did like
has
special forces training.
He has legit military training. The only other video I could think of that's even comparable is like Sadat is like visiting the UAE at one point, and he's on like a hunting trip. They like take him on this impromptu hunting trip. He has no idea about it, so he's like hunting in a suit and a tie, and like they give him this hunting rifle. They're like to like shoot down this bird, right? And he just like it's like a really old like clip on film, and he just like pops down like 4 birds out of this guy. Just pop, pop. You hear 4 shots, 4 birds come down. It's nuts.
What about this?
What's up? What are we looking at right now? I mean, Saddam Hussein, the word on the street is when he was 5 and he went to go visit his uncle because he wanted to go to school, his uncle told him that he couldn't take care of him, and his uncle gave him like $500 and a gun. He was like 5 and told him to go to Baghdad.
Sounds like horse shit. Is every evil person? It's every evil person have a mustache?
It's completely true. It's a confirmed story. Saddam
Really?
Hussein. Yeah. So say what you will about the guy, but he really was about that life. He came up rough, dude.
He's like obsessed with like the American gangster.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at this shit, bro.
Like he was about it. I don't know how good he would have actually been with a gun, given I'm not sure if he did military service for more than like a year or something. But Saddam Hussein in his younger days was 100% the kind of guy who was like, yeah, no, he definitely had it pretty. Like I'm not definitely not justifying anything he did, but when you look back at his childhood, you're like, oh, that's why he sucked. You're like.
Yeah, I mean, like he certainly used guns to shoot people point blank in the back of the head, and well, no, he doesn't shoot him in the back of the head. He has him face him when he does it.
Yeah, he was definitely one of those types of like like one of those kinds of guys who was like not scared of whatever. But yeah, I mean, as far as whatchamacallit, what's some other stuff that's been going on in the news? Hang on a sec.
I was gonna say something. This Assad shit, right? Did you see he just gave a speech about how the Americans are the real Nazis and stuff?
He's a retard. He's amazing. Fun fact about Assad, his family learned torture techniques from Nazis that they harbored after World War II. So that's a fun one for you.
Yeah, that's what we were laughing about.
Ooh, on the topic, did y'all hear about this new group that's coming out of Pakistan? What are we thinking? Do we think this is another TTP front? Or are we thinking these guys got their own thing going on?
Yeah.
They carried out this like quadruple suicide bombing attack on a police station, and then they announced themselves. They called themselves Ansarul Jihad. And
Jihad's little helpers.
I don't know if this one's victory or help, but yeah, they came out and they're like, yeah, we're a new group. There's a lot of theories going around. Obviously, you had the Tehreek-e-Jihad in Pakistan that came around back in February, and a lot of people
ask Ghazi.
That would be a good. A lot of people just theorize that those guys are like a front for the Pakistani Taliban. There's a lot of this stuff that goes on with kind of that area.
Well, also,
like
the Pakistani Taliban are an umbrella group. There is no Pakistani Taliban.
That's true. However, the people within the Pakistan, like the Pakistani Taliban group or the umbrella group, have not claimed Tehreek-e-Jihad as a affiliate, which normally they would in these kinds of situations. But there's the other thing in Kashmir where you've got, like, the People's Anti-Fascist Front, who people say, well, that's just a front for Lashkar-e-Taiba, so they can have more non-Islamist aesthetics or whatever, so that they can seem more appealing to outsiders.
But they already got the sickest flag in the biz.
You're talking about the People's Anti-Fascist Front?
No, like Al-Taiba?
Yeah, Taiba. Taiba, or whatever you want to call them. I haven't seen their flag. Might have. I don't know. A lot of these flags just end up blurring to me after a little bit.
I put Pakistan. I got to put Kashmir. LT is what the US calls them. Just give me their Wikipedia, for God's sakes. There we go. Check out this flag. Like, that's hardcore. I'd be like, I love anti-flag, and then I'll post this picture.
Kind of fuck with it.
Right? I seriously think this is like the #1 best jihadi flag. It's just got so much going for it. Okay, so what happens next? I don't think the war in Palestine is gonna downscale anything anytime soon. With this coalition going in with the Houthis, is trade going to be impacted, or is the coalition magically going to be able to succeed? Everyone left. It's just me here now. Now I'm here talking to myself. That's chaos theory.
No, I'm here still. I was letting you finish up that. Like I said earlier, I kind of just think it's going to be another issue where you have Iranian proxies who you're going to have to deal with every couple months, firing missiles, firing drones at certain targets. And, then the U.S. will go and bomb certain positions, and they'll stop for a couple months, and then they'll come back in a couple months, do the same thing. They play this little game, and yeah.
Haven't they already been doing that, though?
Yeah, that's kind of what they're already doing. And I think it's going to take the U.S. bombing a launch position for them to stop for a bit. And then they'll pick back up again in a couple of months. But as far as the effect on international trade, I don't know how the markets are going to feel about that.
I think gas prices will raise a little bit, and that's about it.
What else comes through the Red Sea? Is it just gas?
Well, I had it on the other thing. It's like that I had to close down, but I had notes on the other one, but because we had to close it down, it's like 10% of the world's gas, and then it's like, well, I don't know, 15% of EU trade or something. I don't know. It's gone now.
So I guess
it was $1 trillion at least.
It'll take a little longer to deliver. This is kind of this brings me back to something that I discussed with a professor of mine, where she talks pretty adamantly about how, you remember back when things were finally opening up after COVID and there was like a shortage on everything all of a sudden?
Mm-hmm.
She was talking to me about how there isn't really a shortage of stuff. There's never been a shortage of stuff, but there's a shortage of proper lanes of transportation. And she was saying, when there are shortages, it's almost never because there's not enough stuff, but because we don't have enough ways or enough people staffed to transport them. So this might exacerbate that problem, where we may see it's like, oh, you've got a shortage of insert item you see at the grocery store here or whatever. So I could see that being a possibility. Again, I'm not entirely sure of the entire scope of what comes in and out of the Red Sea. Again, I feel like maybe it won't affect the U.S. as much. I don't know how much the stuff we bring through the Red Sea outside of oil and gas, I wouldn't imagine if we
I
wanted
think
to
it's going to
ship stuff.
affect the EU more.
If we ship products, like actual products that we ship, I would imagine come through the Pacific.
Now, what do we think?
That's
what do we think hurt
for
trade routes more? The Houthis attacking ships or boat get stuck?
Oh, Evergreen, fuck that.
Boat gets stuck.
The boat getting stuck was not. By the way, Karl Marx talks about this. Read Theory.
I know he does. I know he does. Because it was funny because somebody was like, Karl Marx
disavowed. Don't listen to
and
Ace.
then people were like,
Theory.
hey,
Touch
actually,
grass.
Karl Marx did say something about this.
Oh, real shit though. I kind of agree with Jack. You should read, like, I'm talking total nonfiction. You should only read books that give you information about stuff that has happened. Theory is kind of for nerds. You should read.
As Ace has said in the past, theory is gay.
Theory is gay, and you should probably read, like, I don't know. I would recommend The Taliban by Ahmed Rashid. That's a good one.
I didn't say only news.
Only news. And what's another good one? I ordered a good book about
Every day of my life
recently.
was a struggle.
Every day of my life has been a struggle since I discovered that tankies exist and libertarians also exist. It's been pretty bad since then. And yeah, it just shocks me that people can be that retarded. I'm not.
If you want to read Theory,
it's called My Whole Life Was a Struggle. That's what
yeah. If you want to read Theory, read Ayn Rand because at least it's a story.
I actually have Che Guevara's book on guerrilla warfare, and it's literally just like
it's really good.
Yeah, it's like 200 pages of like diagrams. This guy's like actually drawing up.
Masood in Afghanistan. That was one of his main tactical influences with Che.
Yeah,
and that's why that's why he's like kind of like better than Che. He perfected Che's method. All right. So I think what we've determined is that a boat is stronger than the Houthis. A big boat.
Boat getting stuck.
Why don't the Houthis hijack a big boat and get it stuck? That would really fuck.
That would be baller.
And then boom, instantly we get banned for promoting a terrorist organization.
That would be baller. Take that for praxis, you fucking nerd. You guys should all join us on Saturday at around 11:45 Eastern or 10:45 Eastern, whatever the time is. And we're going to be talking about Myanmar.
That's true.
Oh, is that the time? We got a time now?
Yeah. Everything's echoing for me.
Yeah, me too. I think it's James.
It's all right. We're about to finish. So.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Yeah, see, that fixed it.